Karen, what's your cat's name?
Winston.
Winston, hi.
That's adorable.
Is he all
I feel like
black?
that's a good cat name, like a serious cat, you know?
Exactly.
Is all black, and his favorite thing to do is sit on a binder when I'm in a meeting.
Getting like Winston-Salem, black cat, witch vibes? Hello, John. Hey, Derek. Margaret's here. Great. I think I've only heard from one person who won't be able to make it this evening. We'll be down at Counselor Shaw.
I'm retired and this is my 4th Zoom meeting today.
Oh boy.
Margaret, you're doing retirement wrong.
I know.
I think that's one more Zoom meeting than me today. And I'm working.
Yeah.
And I do this a lot. All right, so
This meeting is being recorded.
it is 5:30, so we will go ahead and get started. As the nice lady tells us, this meeting is being recorded. It's also being live streamed on Boxcast. It'll be available on YouTube following this meeting. Now it's been a little while since we've been together, but please remember to raise your hand before speaking, just to try to limit that crosstalk, though we will have breakout rooms tonight. You can find the raise hand button. I don't think they've moved it. Nope. In the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says raise hands. Any questions before we get started? All right, so our first order of business tonight is to review the charter shell. So we've already done a lot of really great work on the charter together, and then we received some comments from a couple of members. So I thought I would just go through the charter kind of article by article. And if folks have any concerns, questions, comments that you'd like to bring up, this will be the time to do it. So let's just get started. And everybody see this okay? Okay, great. So just starting at Article 1. So that says title of enactment, name and boundaries. We did get one question about this section 1.2 name. It is repetitive. It does say both the municipality of Tigard and then it continues to say continues to be a municipal corporation. So there's use of that municipality twice in that area. And so we got a question on it. Is that necessary? And this is one of those examples where beautiful English is not always the goal of the charter as much as clear legal language. And so the municipality is a clear legal term, and then a municipal corporation is another legal term, both of which are required to be in that sentence in the charter. Any other questions, comments, concerns about Article 1? Okay, moving on to Article 2, powers of the city. Questions, comments, or concerns? Okay. In Article 3, this is elected officials, and this is where we spent a lot of our time over the last couple meetings. So we did update council composition to a mayor and 6 councilors. In the mayor is a voting member who has no veto authority, as this group agreed upon. We did get one comment that asked us to rearrange these A, B, C, D to move approve the agenda for council meetings above preside over and facilitate council meetings, just because that is the order of operations. You would approve the agenda before you host the meeting. So we made that change. Then we have the no interference clause, as discussed in this group, and then the requirement for council rules as recommended by this committee as well. And Margaret, please.
Okay, this is more of a comment and something to kind of be put into the list of to do and not put in the charter. But I was looking at this, and when we have us actually 7 members of the council versus the 5 that we have now, that adds a lot of duties to the administrative assistant that's working. And I think in Tigard is that, and it's to the mayor, and it's to the the city manager and all these others. And so I'm just going to make a strong suggestion that if you are going to increase the numbers of counselors, please increase the staff that they have to work with, maybe add another body. So.
Yeah, Margaret, that's a great point, and definitely something we are already discussing at the staff level.
Yeah.
Understanding that there is definitely going to be that increased burden in order to keep everybody involved and informed and to respond appropriately to counselors.
And exactly, especially if you have new counselors coming on that are not used to the system. So just kind of put on the to-do list. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for thinking of that. And Karen, please.
The phrase resolution of censure is in there. And that was not a phrase that I was excited about keeping. Just because I don't think it really does anything. So I'm not sure what up to and including a resolution of censure really includes. And I guess I was hoping to be a little more specific maybe about things that could happen, like losing committee positions or other things.
Shelby, you want to talk to censure?
Yeah, so the point of saying up to and including resolution of censure is basically to list the highest bad thing that could happen. And then everything underneath that is at the discretion of council. So it depends on how bad the violation is, whether they want to, whether it's just a public admonishment, whether it's removing some duties of council assignments. A censure isn't really a whole lot more than a public admonishment, but it's a little more formal that they would adopt a resolution saying you were really bad. So what I wanted to do was clarify that that was the highest bad thing that could happen, because then everything else underneath that is something that council has the ability to talk amongst themselves and figure it out, but there's no concern about what their range of options is. So we can list out what the options are. My concern with listing it out is that generally in the law, there's a premise that if it's listed and there's something excluded from the list, that exclusion was intentional. And so I don't want I want to make sure that if we do include a list, that it says that this is optional and that there are other things that they could consider, because I don't want the list to be viewed as exhaustive. And for 20 years down the road, council has some great idea about how to punish somebody, but it's not in the charter, so they can't do it. So that was kind of my thought process there.
Karen, if you have any reply first, and then Jason.
I do, just because I'm really wondering, is resolution of censure really the worst thing? I guess it doesn't.
I was just going to say, no, I don't think so, Karen. Literally, I don't think it is. If it's just saying you were naughty, that's not worse than other thing, than taking committees away. So that, Karen, you hit it right on the head from my comment.
Jason, please continue. Did you have a suggestion on what you would like to see there instead?
Well, I was going to actually ask the city attorney, given that comment that Karen made and then I reinforced, like, what is, because City Attorney Rahala, are you saying that you think that from your legal perspective or from the legal perspective, the telling you you're naughty, like you're naughty, is the worst thing that can happen? That's worse than having privileges and assignments taken away from you? I'm just having a little trouble with that, but maybe I'm not thinking about it the way a lawyer would.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the perception, from the legal standpoint, I do think that a censure is I think it's the highest bad thing. I think that practically, though, you're probably right that if somebody has done the bad thing and hasn't responded to corrective action already, that probably the resolution of censure is they're just going to continue to thumb their nose at it. I think, suspension of privileges or revocation of privileges, it depends on what it is. I think there are some members who could say, fine, I don't want to attend a committee anymore. My evenings are free. Great. So I think it really depends on what is of value to that specific member and what their interests are. The other thing that I did want to clarify here is that whereas the no interference clause, we did discuss removal is the highest worst thing that can happen. I did want to clarify that that's not on the table here. So I'm totally open to other penalties there, but I did want to specifically say that removal is not an option.
Thanks, Shelby. Derek, you put your hand down.
I was actually just going to ask about that final point that was addressed was I thought we had discussed unanimous vote allowing for removal, but it sounds like that's in a separate section of the charter. So I guess other than to clarify why it's not an option here, but beyond that, I've got nothing.
Fair. Yeah, it is included in section 3.3, no interference, that I've highlighted here, and does require the unanimous vote. And Margaret, please.
My question is can the definition of censure, where it goes including a resolution for censure, can part of that resolution of censure include taking away committees and literally having the person have no role whatsoever on the council?
Yeah,
Can that legally be part of it?
Yeah, I think so. And we can add to that sentence up to and including resolution of censure and removal of council assignments.
Well, and the reason is that censure usually on the state level means you are censured and you're doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit on the floor, but you're doing nothing. So I just didn't know if that was still the case with cities. So.
Thank you, Margaret. And Zachary, please.
So I actually have a question on what would constitute the removal of like all this like stuff like, censures and coming to a resolution. And if someone could give me an example of what like the two sides would be, I think that could help me a lot more in like practicality.
Like what would be like a big enough, like you misbehaved that someone, Jason or John, I think you've both experienced it. Would you like to share either one of you, would you like to share an example?
I draft John. I've already talked today.
John, you're on deck.
Basically, we've had, I'll cite an example that Jason spoke of earlier and at a different meeting. And we had a counselor who basically physically abused a citizen and almost got to fisticuffs, and without Jason stepping in between them, it would have been real bad. So things like that. We've had other situations where I think another one that it's very that falls into play is speaking items that happen in executive session where you're not supposed to talk about them. That's another important one, where in executive session, you're not allowed to speak about it until that item's been passed in public. And even then, you don't really tell what happened in executive session. So it's where they're supposed to keep things quiet and they don't.
Zachary?
Yeah. Also just, around the country in the news, around the state and country, any kind of inappropriate comment, there's a lot of public officials now who are on the hook for sexist comments, racist comments, anything inappropriate that a city councilor does in their official capacity would be included in this.
There was actually a counselor in Roseburg fairly recently who was censured for a transphobic comment. Thank you, John, for sending me that article. Okay, so what I hear for Article 3 is to add and removal of council assignments to the penalty list for violating council rules. Any other comments, concerns? Jason, please.
I would, I would just ask Shelby to try to make that as broad as it can be. I mean, I would like it to probably read more something like up to and including removal of any and all assignments, or something like that, not just committee assignments. I don't even know what they might be in the future, but I think other than the serving as a sitting council, kind of like the Margaret's equivalent at the state level, like, okay, you can be on the floor, but that's all you're going to do. You're not going to do anything else. Like how do we, I think that's actually a good standard to say is the threat in addition to censure. So, because that's pretty broad too and all encompassing. So I don't know what the right legal language is to put in there, but to me, that's the right concept.
Thanks, Jason. So I just have this noted then as just make it as broad as possible, leave all options to the future councils as we can. And Zachary, please.
Yeah, I really appreciated the comments before about like what, you know, is right as a counselor and what isn't. And I just thought that kind of like what Schneider was thinking with, you know, we should have a little bit of broadness to it too. That way it's like, because I know like if someone were to do something bad, it would be like, would it be just like a vote of like the counselors, or would it be like, how would it be like dealt with is my question. Kind of.
Yes, it would be a vote of the counselors.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, then if it was just a vote of the counselors and stuff, I mean, although I do think there should be punishments, I also think that it should be up to an extent. That way, like if they ever, like, there's like some mediator, you know, aside from just the counselors, like the city manager or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and this does not remove someone from office. They do not remove from being a counselor.
Oh, okay. There'll just be like punishments.
Mhm.
Okay. Then that's good to know. Yeah, because I was thinking like if we could just remove someone from office of this, then like, you know, that'd probably be an overstep.
Zach, this is not for those kinds of things, honestly. I mean, this is not for you have political disagreements or you don't like the way someone voted on something. This is for like someone that was about to physically assault a member of the public after a meeting, or, you know, consistently making it impossible for our staff to get work done, or making it so the city of Lake Oswego hated everybody in Tigard like that. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about, not that kind of more like just disagree with you politically. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, these are worst case scenarios. Absolutely. Karen, please.
Well, I was going to say there's actually worse, because if it's an ethics violation, then that has its own path of badness. And because this specifically says violation of the ground rules, it really is the rules that council agrees to abide by to get along and get work done. So I just wanted Zachary to know that there's yet another layer of things you could do wrong.
Thanks, Karen. All right, moving on to, we're gonna skip through Article 4 because we don't have anything there yet, TBD, but Article 5, so this was elections. We've copied in the oath, and then we did have one comment actually from Karen about terms, and it has to do with this last sentence, which says elections to the office of mayor and council will be held at the general election with the candidate receiving the highest number of votes being elected to office. And this is a little unclear because while the mayor will receive the highest number of votes and be elected to office, the councilors who receive the highest numbers of votes will become elected. So we're going to separate that into two sentences. So thank you for pointing that out, Karen. Any other questions, concerns, comments about Article 5? Okay. So moving on to Article 6. This is a lot of, say, like kind of the boilerplate that goes into a charter, the details about quorum, which is the majority number of council members, the records being kept. We talked about that in our first meeting. The records be kept in manner prescribed by state law. Voting, so council needs to vote in order to come to decisions, ordaining clause, adoption, how the vote is recorded. Any questions, concerns, comments on Article 6? Erin, please.
Me again. Actually looking at 6.4,
Mhm.
I'm interested in what the legal definition of express approval is. I'm wondering if that's a roll call vote versus a secret ballot vote.
So state law doesn't allow secret ballots. So express approval is basically there has to be an affirmative vote. It can't just be implied of like, you think that I support it, but I haven't actually said it.
Thank you, Shelby. Thanks for the question, Karen. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? John, please.
Just so people understand, when we're voting, I mean, there's a lot of times when it's just a verbal vote, you know, you want to, somebody makes a motion to adjourn, all in favor, say aye, aye. And then there's times when we actually have to call names to make a vote. So in land use cases and other things like that, we usually do it in a lot of different things. But there are two types of voting that happen, just so people understand. And Carol probably will talk about it more clearly than I will, but I just want to let people know that it doesn't have to be, name calling. At the same time, when we voted on our council president, we actually did a vote on a piece of paper and we handed that in. And so it wasn't a secret ballot because it's still, Carol still knows what they are and you can still ask who voted for who. But at the same time, we didn't raise a hand and say who we were voting for council president. It went on a piece of paper and Carol took those and then tallied them up and then told us who the council president was. So there's basically 3 different ways that we vote so people understand.
Thanks, John. And City Recorder Carol, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add that by charter, we're required to have a roll call vote for ordinances. And then as far as the votes for council president, they do get a little ballot with everyone listed. They do mark it, they turn it in, they also sign it. And that becomes part of the council record. So that is in the official packet for that meeting. So you can actually see who voted for who.
Thanks, Carol.
Yeah.
Jason, please.
So Carol just made a comment about it being in the charter that we do roll call votes for ordinances. Carol, is that what you said?
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought that.
So I think we should clarify whether it's going to be in the new charter or not, and whether it should. I mean, maybe we should discuss whether it should be. How is it written now, or is that covered explicitly?
I'm gonna go look for that right now. So what the record or what the charter currently says is, upon the final vote on an ordinance, the ayes and nays of the members shall be taken and recorded in the journal.
So the shall be taken, is that, I always thought that meant that they vote, or that it's a roll call vote.
Well, especially to get the ayes and nays, wouldn't you need that, Carol, to be able to fulfill that duty?
Yeah.
So on here, so C is what we have written into the shell right now, a vote whether to adopt the ordinance. And then this D is what is currently in the charter. Upon the final vote on ordinance, the ayes and nays of the members shall be taken and recorded in the journal. So I guess the question is for this group, whether or not the explicit roll call vote is desired.
If it is, let's call it that.
Yeah. John, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would say yes. The problem we have sometimes, and it gets very difficult when you do an aye or a nay vote and it's verbal only. Number one, with 5 people, it's a little easier. With 7, it's going to be harder because you're trying to look and see. But the main thing is a lot of times some people will nod their head or pretend to say aye, but I never heard a word coming out of their mouth. And so in their mind, they sort of felt like, oh, I didn't really have to say yes, but I didn't want to say no. And so from that standpoint, I actually like the fact that it has to be on record that they voted one way or another. And they can abstain if they want, but at least puts them on record of doing something. This ayes and nays and you hear the majority and the loudest wins isn't always my favorite because some people sort of mouth it.
Thanks, John. And Tony, please.
Oh, I just had a quick question about the shall. Early on, I think we had mentioned that I think it was the shalls we were looking to maybe change those to wills or musts or something so that it was a little more direct and affirmative.
Oh yeah, this is not going to make it into the charter verbatim. It's just the example from the old charter.
Yeah, just the shalls were like, okay.
No, there won't be a shall.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. But did you have a thought on whether or not you liked the roll call vote versus the more ambiguous language?
I think that's exactly, yeah, I like the roll call. Less ambiguous is better. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Does anyone have, oh, Shelby, I see.
Yeah, so let's add under 6.6C, let's just say a roll call vote, whether to adopt. So just insert. Yep.
Is that what you wanted?
Yes. Did you delete the last one? Wasn't there one beneath it?
The one that was the previous charter.
Okay,
Like, I just
okay.
copied it in so we had we could see them both side by side.
Okay, I saw things get deleted. Just want to make sure.
No, nothing important. Nothing important's gone. Carol, please.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so that would still allow voice votes on things like adjournment and consent agenda and resolutions. Is that correct?
Yes, this is only for the adoption of
Ordinances.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns on Article 6? All right, so moving on to Article 7. We talked about this quite a while ago. Improvement, special assessments, and debt limit. And we had agreed in this group to defer to state law, citing that it was pretty comprehensive in these areas. And so that's the language that has been added to the charter. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All right, and moving on to Article 8. This is our miscellaneous provisions. Again, I think you might have seen a lot of this in the very first shell that we sent out. This was written into it. There shouldn't be anything new since then. That's the first review. So, but now that we've spent a lot of time in the charter together, any questions, comments, or concerns? And Karen, please.
I did think we were missing a comma in 8.2.
8.2. Was it here where I've got a red line? Is Grammarly saying that we're missing a comma?
I can't see a red line.
Oh, it's here in pending matters. You sent it to us in an email, right? Yeah, we'll go back and look for that. And yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And Lindsay, please.
Can you just refresh my memory on why 7.2 is governed by ordinance and the other two are governed by state law?
Shelby. Do you remember why that one was governed by ordinance?
I think because the other two are actually governed by state law, so there is a statute, whereas
Gotcha.
special assessments is more up to the discretion of the city council. There is a state statute that allows for the collection of special assessments, but if it was actually to be imposed, city council would have to figure out the details, which would be by ordinance.
Okay, and that's assuming that we would always have like an ordinance about special assessments, that is not something that would go away.
Right, that would be, yeah, it would be something that, so like improvements in debt limit are governed by statute and those are always there. Special assessments is more of a, if we actually decided to do something special, then we would pass an ordinance to impose it. It's not something that just kind of exists in the background, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that is really helpful. Perfect. Thank you.
Any last questions, comments, or concerns about Article 8? Okay, well, that is our charter up until this point. Feel free to continue to review the shell. We'll continue to send you updated comments, and we'll make more time in future meetings to go through other updates that we've made. Thank you. Really appreciate all of the close reading that this group was able to do in the last 2 weeks. So moving on to our next element of the agenda. So youth counselor, when we last left off, I was going to do a lot more research on youth counselors across the nation. And what I found was there are a lot of different versions of kind of youth councils, some of them with some very elaborate elections, and then also with youth counselors, all kind of similar to how Tigard's is currently set up. But I wasn't able to find any examples, and I talked to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Jason and I were able to make contact, and they didn't have any examples explicitly of full voting members. But one of the really interesting other examples of a system similar to Tigard's is Pennsylvania's Junior Councilperson program. And they're very similar. You have it's state run, and then different cities kind of sign on to this program and adopt the state's rules around it, except that it's a little less, I want to say, stringent than Tigard's. So Tigard youth counselors sign on for a 1-year term, and then they serve for that length of time. In Pennsylvania, they allow for multiple junior council persons and have varying term lengths, depending on kind of the requirements of the high schooler who's being involved in that program. So I think we all remember being involved in after school activities. Some of them were seasonal, whether you did a winter sport or a spring sport. Maybe you had your summers free, but you had your falls, you were busy doing marching band like I was, or football like my brothers. So it allows for more of that flexibility than Tigard's current program does. Why I tell you all of this is going back to this question about whether or not it makes sense to put something into our charter versus leaving it to council and staff discretion to evolve and change over time. So the question that we had posed was, does this committee recommend that the youth counselor made as an advisory position at the discretion of council, or be added to the charter as an official position? And just wanted to bring up kind of these examples of other options that exist that we may want to leave that flexibility open. Not that we don't want to include youth in our government processes and continue to grow that, but that there may be other ways to do it that we don't want to prescribe for a council for the next 20 years. Jason, please.
Well, this is certainly something close to my heart, since I proposed and helped get it in place in my time. I guess I will just make the pitch for it being put into the charter, because I think there will never be a time where it will be acceptable to be excluding youth voice in our community, or to not have youth voice at the decision-making table, even if we can't allow them a formal vote. And there are things we can't allow because of state law currently. I think it's the right thing to do. And just because I would go out on a limb and say anyone who in the future decided that was the wrong thing to do, that they would be wrong. So I feel comfortable saying that. I don't think it will ever be okay to systematically exclude representation or voice from 20 to 25% of the population. I just think that's unacceptable. And so I would that's my case for why it should be included permanently in the charter.
Thanks, Jason. And Zachary, please.
Well, I understand the thought process behind putting it as part of the charter and just at the discretion of the council. And although I do agree with Schneider's comment that there should be more representation for youth and stuff, I also feel like it should be limited in some way. That way it's not like unless the youth counselor is like elected, through like a formal process rather than just chosen by the council. I don't really know. I mean, it's a tough question to think about. I mean, I'm assuming we'd have elections, right, for the youth counselors?
Just to clarify the youth counselor position, I think for everyone in this group who may not be as familiar, it is an application process that youth can apply. They are then selected and shall be by the council, correct? Or by staff, by the council. And then they serve on the dais with the rest of the council and make an advisory vote. So it is not a binding vote of a counselor, but they do advise council on the opinions of themselves and who they represent, which is the youth of Tigard. Does that help, Zachary?
Yeah, I think we should leave it at that. I mean, I don't know. I feel like if we make it a full-on vote, it might be too much. But then if we also, underrepresent it, then we're not representing the youth.
We are not in any way proposing that they would have a full vote, just that the advisory position would be a chartered position so that the city would be required to always have a youth member sitting on the council giving an advisory vote.
Oh, okay, that's a lot more reassuring. Because I thought when you guys are saying, I believe, the youth should be represented, I thought you guys were talking about like a full-on like vote. But if it's just an advisory vote and it's just kind of like recommendation to the counselors, then I feel like that's a lot more important and a lot more productive towards bringing opportunity to the kids. I just thought I would clarify out there that although, I was a kid and I did want to be part of like, the government, I think waiting till you're 18 and formally chosen is the best option, but you could always get involved from a younger age, like programs we are establishing now. And I appreciate the fact that we actually are adding that, because I honestly just kind of assumed when I was younger that there wasn't much programs that the government really provided for kids to be more involved with the community. And given my last senior year being so involved with Tigard, I'm just astonished by how much opportunity there actually is within this circle of, our community.
Thank you, Zachary. Thank you for being here. Tony, please.
I'm curious about what the age range. I mean, we're saying youth, and I think, at least for me, when I think of youth, I'm thinking, junior high, high school. I'm kind of thinking in that age range, and if we're saying youth, that actually covers from like child to 17 and 9/10. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but what that is. But also, if we're putting it in the charter and making it so that the city council is obligated to create this position and this mechanism, I think we're kind of also potentially tying their hands for updates and changes in technology over the next 20 years. So while I support Jason's spirit of what his position is, I'm not sure that it really needs to be thrown into the charters. Kind of, I'm just curious how this whole mechanism concept would work. I mean, of course we can talk it through. So, we've had good chats before.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. So I found youth councils from all over the country, and they range from anywhere from starting at age 8 to starting at age 17. I don't know what the application process is for youth counselor in Tigard, but I believe the last few have all been juniors and seniors in high school. Shelby, did you not?
But I believe that's true, yes.
Kim, I would separate though the discussion of the youth council and the youth city councilor. Those are not the same things. And while an 8th grader might participate in one, they can't be the youth counselor, at least as it's envisioned now.
That's true. I was just more making a clarification that the term youth is confusing. Thank you though. And Zena, please.
So the youth counselor, is they are appointed for just a year, right? It's just for a year.
Yeah, it's a 1-year appointment.
So, but then they have to learn so much in 1 year. So, isn't it like a short period? Like, because the first year they have so much to learn, so they get very less to contribute in a way.
Are you suggesting that you would like the?
Yeah, like a 2-year terms or something like that.
Okay, thank you, Zena. Carol, please. Oh, Carol, you're muted.
Actually, the youth counselor we have this year is on her second year because we didn't have anyone else apply. But I just wanted to mention that as far as the advisory vote, they don't vote on everything. They don't vote on land use issues, the budget, consent agenda, and adjournment. So, you know, they are limited in what they can participate in.
Thank you, Carol, for the clarification.
As far as a vote, but they are, you know, they usually join the discussion and their opinion is sought.
Someone who gives presentations to council. I got some good questions from our youth council. Zachary, please.
I just kind of believe in a lot of the stuff we're saying, like giving more opportunity and stuff. But I feel like part of the reason why the youth counselor position wasn't really, because I didn't even know you could apply, if I'm going to be honest. I didn't know about TYAC until my friend like posted on her story. And I feel like there should be more advertising, at least within Tigard, to children, youth, like through the schools maybe or something, where you could be like, hey, you know, there's X position, there's this position, kind of like in the newspaper, or at least like in the Weekly Wolf they have at Tualatin High School or something like that, where they can kind of get the name out more. That way more kids feel like they can get involved. Because it's not that our program's like not good. Like this is really good. Like I was surprised I even found any of this. But I feel like it's just like the hard part is getting it out there to all the young kids. And on the point of the age, right, that we want counselors to be, I feel like it should be strictly high school, but I wouldn't know any more than that. Like I was thinking we could do like 16 to 18, but I'm welcome or more than happy to do like 14 to 18 or something, or 17, like if you're about to turn 18 during the term, you know, until you finish high school or something.
Yeah. Thank you, Zachary. And Jason, please.
And just to answer some of the questions that are coming up and maybe even give a little more context as to why the program is set up the way it is now as far as age, et cetera. It is open to, so when you apply in April, it is open to sophomores and juniors that reside in Tigard and go to any high school. They can go to any high school. The point is that they're a Tigard community member. And they're sophomores and juniors who will then be juniors and seniors the following school year. I think from a decision-making, sort of frontal lobe development perspective, I think that's the right age group to be targeting. I think if it were much young, I think it's already a big challenge to frankly figure things out. To Zena's point earlier, they're never going to get on the same level that an adult would in 3 years in their 1 year as a youth member. It's just not practical, but it's better than not having them at the table from my perspective. But I think it'd be very problematic to have a 9th grader who just came out of middle school trying to serve in the role. So that would be concerning from my perspective, at least, just as far as the decision-making and complex thinking that is needed, and that's still pretty early in development at that age.
Thanks, Jason. And Dolly, please. Oh, Dolly, you're muted.
can finally talk without the disturbance of a child in my lap. But I think I'm with Jason on putting it, and I would like to see it on the charter because we're moving forward and the trend, you know, we are at the point now where we do have a generation of very empowered youth. And I think junior, senior would be a good timing also because more and more schools, in fact, if not all schools, and Zachary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is really encouraging student leadership and everything, and especially listening to Commissioner Nag, who's, you know, Ashiki Nag. We were talking about it during the Tigard leadership, precisely that our generation, you know, compared to this new generation, they're really, you know, thank you to all the Yusuf Sais of the world and all the activists and social media. The youth is really more empowered and they're really more involved. And I think putting it in the charter puts it in place so they know what to aspire to, especially the ones who have political you know, aspirations for their future. If we put it in place, it gives them something to look forward to already there, especially considering, look, we're doing the charter review in 60 years, and I think it is time, it is appropriate to put that in place now. Although I still think that it should be an appointed position, not an elected one, because that's way too much pressure for them.
Thank you, Dolly. And Zachary, please.
Okay, I mean, I guess I understand if it's just an advisory vote. An advisory vote doesn't count as like a full city councilor vote at all, right? Yeah, no. Okay, yeah. So I guess making it not elected does make sense and appointed does make sense. And if you apply as a sophomore or junior, you'd be going in junior or senior, right?
Yes, you would.
Okay, I was just assuming based on the language I've heard. I mean, I think that's a good idea. To go back to Dolly's point though, and maybe I guess what Shiki was thinking with, you know, a lot of awareness, social media and stuff. I feel like some people do know, but some people don't know. Because like a lot of the sources are like, I mean, I can't really speak too much to this because like I don't know this full scope of the advertising.
Well, Zachary, I think maybe we should talk offline from this conversation about how
Okay.
we're going to advertise this position a little bit separately from the charter. If you don't mind, we'd love your thoughts on it because we do need some help getting the word out, but it just might not be best for this conversation.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it in later, but yeah, if we're gonna talk about advertising, I guess I'll talk about it another time because I feel like there is some ways we can improve on that. Yeah, thank you for that.
Great, thank you. And John, please.
Yeah, I have no problem putting it in. I think it makes sense, and I like the you know, the futuristic look of it. My worry is, what if you can't find one? And by having it in, you know, maybe it makes staff work a little harder, or the council to twist a few more arms, and so maybe that's a good thing. But the fact is, I know right now they don't have an applicant for next year. So from that standpoint, it would need to be worded somehow where if it wasn't filled, you know, the world didn't end, you know. And so I think wording would be important to me. But at the same time, I don't want the wording to be too light or slight, so they just blow it off, you know. So I think that's where my problem comes into play with it is I don't mind it being there. The wording would be very important to me.
Thank you, John. It's a great point. And Margaret, please.
Thank you. The one thing that I would just like to add, and I agree with what people have been saying, but just don't limit it to juniors and seniors, because at Tigard High School a couple of years ago, the strongest activists that we had in the school were sophomores. And these were the ones that were leading the marches and going to the legislature and testifying and this kind of thing. And sometimes age doesn't necessarily mean that they're not the best for the position, especially when it comes to activism. So, you know, I think, you know, not necessarily want a second grader in there, but I think that I would not really want to go through and limit it just to juniors and seniors, because there's some extremely involved sophomores.
Thank you, Margaret. And I think at this point, and I know we still have 3 more hands, and I'll call on you guys next. I'd like to suggest that maybe we think about this in a very broad term. So to John's point, when we talk about putting this in the charter with some very broad language so that the world doesn't end if we don't have applicants, but also maybe not talking specifically about ages or grades in the charter, but leaving it to a broad youth counselor position that's appointed. Rather than getting too into the details and leaving that freedom really to future councils as things evolve over time. And Nathan, please.
Well, that was actually kind of the point I was going to make as far as what I was supporting was I'm fine with putting it in the charter. I guess I would prefer to see it as something where like the charter is just like a minimum requirement of something like the council has to solicit at least one youth position. And beyond that, they can set the standards of the program however they want. I also had the concern about what if no one applies or something like that. So that was my thought, was just a minimum requirement of council has to at least try to get a advisory youth counselor, but beyond that, they can decide if they want 2 or what ages they want or any of those details.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. I'm sorry, I took the wind out of your sails a little bit. And Derek, please.
As I was thinking about this over the weekend, I was wondering, like, not that I necessarily care if it's in the charter or not, like, I don't think it hurts anything, but are there other ways of engaging the youth using existing systems? Like, for example, I assume the high school has a student council, and like, is there a way to liaise with that council for some of the issues where we want the youth input? We know that currently, right, we have a student or a counselor, right, a youth counselor that renders an advisory vote, and apparently it's limited in scope and they're appointed by the council. Like, I understand all that, but like, are there better ways to do it rather than incorporating it within the city structure? Not out of the interest of like neglecting 25% of the population, as Jason had put it, but more just that if we want the perspective of the youth, shouldn't we go to the youth, like at the high school? Or if it's important enough for the youth to give an opinion on it, they can come to the council and address the council just like any other citizen can. There's no limitation in this regard. So these are kind of some of the things I was thinking about. I don't personally see the need to incorporate it in the charter. That may be a very unpopular opinion within the group right now. I'm not really quite sure on the read of the room here, but you know, I feel like there are probably better ways to implement this, but I could be wrong. Like, certainly open to hearing more.
And Derek, I would say that this is one of several ways that the city tries to engage with the youth. To your point about student council, I was the facilitator for our public safety advisory board, where we had 2 youth members, one who was the president of the Black Student Union and another who was the president of the student council. I think it's called ASB. So there are lots, and then there's the Tigard Youth Advisory Council, which Zachary is a part of. That's how we got him into this charter review committee as a volunteer. So this is the tip of the iceberg, I would say, probably for youth engagement in Tigard. And Zachary, please.
Okay, now that we've got all the mess hopefully cleaned up, it's just kind of a little bit hard to fully like comprehend all the programs we have and stuff, like you were saying, Kim. But I really think that instead of just leaving it alone, we should at least put, not like to like limit or anything, but like if there was a youth counselor advisory member, if it was possible for them to get elected, and like say someone applied and the council approved, then a minimum requirement would be like they have to be in high school, just because like I wouldn't want to see like an 8th grader or like 7th grader in city council position. I don't know.
And I think leaving that to the discretion of the council would be our suggestion. I don't think the council would want to see that either. But I mean, I watched young Sheldon, and I wouldn't mind seeing him on youth council. So Jason, please.
Just a couple clarifications and pieces of info, maybe one opinion. I think it may be worth thinking about whether the Youth Advisory Council, as it's currently structured, could or should have a role in selecting the youth counselor, and perhaps that is sort of that's the stepping stone or the gateway to becoming the youth counselor. I don't know that that has to be that way, and maybe that's just an idea that is worth thinking about for a moment. I would also just want to make sure that Derek and others that are thinking about youth engagement are thinking about it more broadly than just going to Tigard High School. One of the challenges and I think misnomers or mistakes that some people make is to think that either TTSD is really representative of all of the youth in our community, which is a mistake, or that Tigard High School is. Many Tigard community members actually attend Tualatin High School. A third of the city is in the Beaverton School District. We have we've had very highly qualified. In fact, I would say during my time, they were second place contenders from the Muslim Educational Trust for being the youth advisory counselor or the youth counselor. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about engagement, we're definitely talking about it more broadly than just Tigard High School. And just recognize that Tigard High School probably only represents maybe 60% of the youth, or maybe 50% of the youth that live in Tigard. And so that's just, it's just something to be aware of when we're thinking about this and talking about it. And we've had involvement. I mean, one of our prior youth city councilors was from the Beaverton, one of the Beaverton magnet high schools, who lives in Tigard. So just some thoughts there.
Thank you, Jason. Tony, please.
I think I'm kind of more along the lines of the comments I made about making it, if it's going to be included, that it needs to be sufficiently broad and give the council a wide ability to interpret it how they kind of see fit in the circumstance. Because kind of to Margaret's point, limiting it to a specific like high school range. I mean, there's cases of children that are 12 or younger that are internationally known for their activism and their political chops. And a lot of times how or why somebody becomes involved has to do with an experience that they've had. So if there's an incident at a school, or there's something that's significant that happens in town in a specific area that affects very young children, but it kind of activates them in a way where now they have a reason to get involved, that they have a perspective that maybe wasn't being heard before, to Jason's point about inclusion and making sure that we're hearing voices. I'd kind of like to make sure that the council has the ability, if it's going to be in our charter, I'd want to make it the most broad range that they could to include the voices that they think need to be heard.
Thank you, Tony. So I think what I'm generally hearing from the group is favorable towards the position of youth counselor, but a preference that it be written in a way that gives council broad discretion on how that position is filled and carried out. Is that fair? Anyone deeply opposed to that as the concept?
So I just want to comment. So Councillor Shaw is in the budget committee right now. So she is not able to be here, but we have been texting. Her comments really reiterate what a lot of people have already said. John, she shared your concerns about not being able to find somebody. That has been an issue for this year and last year. Carol, she shared your concern about clarifying advisory vote and that it not be on certain topics like budget and land use. And then Derek, your concerns also about just flexibility for other ways to engage youth. So just reiterating the comment, but wanted to add her voice since she wasn't able to be here.
Thank you for sharing that, Shelby. Derek, please.
I feel like I'm not trying to be like deliberately obtuse here. Maybe I'll just ask Jason directly. Like I don't understand the purpose of the role. I don't get why what the impetus was for creating it, for example. Like, not that I haven't watched city council meetings and seen like the talented most recent member like who participated, but you know, city council, in my opinion, right, just government operations is it's a place of adult voices and stakeholders, generally speaking. And I understand that there is a need to hear the youth, for example, but you know, for example, if my children have concerns, I'll advocate on behalf of my children to the council. I don't necessarily, what I mean is that it's a place for moderated voices, I think is a better way to put it, right? People who are going to come to the council with that breadth and depth of experience, and they're going to bring their long life experience into a chamber where other voices can all meet. And the lower we go on the age spectrum, the more we get people without that experience who are coming and bringing that, which isn't to say that we can all not learn from fresh ideas, which I think we can, but generally an enlightened individual is probably going to be exposed to those already. But, you know, again, once I recognize that this may be a deeply unpopular position, but I truly don't recognize the need for it personally.
I think it's, Kim, is it okay if I respond to
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Please do.
Derek, I think it's great we're having the discussion. I don't think you should, to the extent that you feel like you're on an island, I don't think you should. I think it's totally appropriate to be debating these things thoroughly. I would say a number of things. You know, one is it's fundamentally different, and I would say this having been in elected office for many years, it is fundamentally different to say that you are going to go represent some group and you actually being part of that group and representing that group. That is a fundamental difference in sort of representation and participation. I will also say that there have been many youth city councilors who I would say had better decision-making and judgment capability than some of the adults I've served with. That's happened on numerous occasions. John's laughing because we both, I mean, you would like to think that everyone that gets elected to the city council has all those qualities you just described. And if that were true, that'd be great, but it's just not. And I think that it is, it's just a big miss to not have youth voice in decision-making or at the table while decisions are being made. And it is, again, different when I mean, city council meetings they can be fast-paced, complicated, et cetera. And where you end up in a situation, so if you didn't get the voice and the information you needed before the meeting for the perfect discussion, you're just out of luck, right? Like you have to use the model you're describing would mean that you sort of know exactly what's going to happen at the meeting and you can get the exact kind of information you want, or you can just intuit by using the parent-child example, like you just know what is right for your children, and therefore you know, you are able to just instantly and accurately reflect their whatever their most needs or wants are in the most appropriate way. I will also say that the youth counselor, I think sometimes pushes adults in a way that's healthy. So and I did this when I was a member of a school board. So I was a youth member, and this is partly where the concept came from. I was the youth member of the school board in the school district I grew up in California. And there was a moment where we had a pretty contentious school board where we had 3 members that sort of always voted one way and 2 members that voted another. and there was a pretty important topic and discussion that was going on, and they were just at each other constantly and had completely lost touch with what mattered, which was educating children. And I can't get away with this as an adult, but I could as a kid. I actually stood up in the middle of the meeting. This is being live televised. Stood up in the middle of the meeting, looked at all of them in the face with a straight face and said, when you all want to start talking about educating children again, come get me, I'll be out in the hallway. And, you know, that is the reason I tell that story, is that was a moment that fundamentally shifted, because they all were looking like, I shouldn't use the word on the broadcast here, but they were looking ridiculous. They just didn't know it. And they needed their student apparently to call them out on it. And guess what? The conversation changed pretty quickly, and I was called back into the room within about 30 seconds. And they got the work done and figured it out. I don't know that I should have been, I mean, maybe there were other ways for that to get resolved, but my point is there are moments when, and I think Youth Counselor Nog did this in a couple different times, where she was just like, hey, adults, that's not good enough. And I think it's appropriate. I mean, I think that's an appropriate space for people that are going to be leading our community in the future to at least have one voice that is able to serve that purpose. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you for the story. Dolly, please.
Okay, again, yes, I reiterate that, and my experience also is precisely, I will repeat and I will stress that it is time to just have a seat for them at the table, because then that will grow and then people will be interested in it, because even nationwide, even globally, there's more and more, as Margaret even said, the youth are so involved now as they have never been. And even in school, I think they're even educated better in their civics classes and everything. They're more attentive to really what's going on. It's a group of activists, and if we're making decisions for their future anyway, the sooner they get to the table, I would like to see that better.
Thank you, Dolly. Karen, please.
Hearing the representation word, I'm wondering if maybe this is where Derek is thinking, or maybe not, but hearing it, I'm wondering, there's a lot of groups that don't have representation at city council. And so it's interesting to specify the youth voice, to have a voice at the table, and not necessarily other groups that are not represented. And I feel like we don't, because we put it on the council to be responsible for hearing the voices, getting the community engagement, and hearing the diverse opinions of the city. I'm fine with putting it in, because I do think it's valuable, but it's just intriguing to me, like future thinking. Might there be other groups at some point that could warrant having a similar seat at the table?
That's a great point, Karen. Thank you. And Jason, please.
Karen, I'll just respond by saying they're the only group that is literally not allowed to have a voice. They're systematically excluded because of all the rules we have about that the city attorney has gone over about who can be an elector and therefore who can become a city councilor. And that's the difference for me, is that they are literally not able. So every other group or group of individuals or groups that desire to have their own representation, if they've got an adult that's a candidate, that person, if they meet the residency requirements of the city, they could end up on the city council. There is no member of the youth community that could ever do that.
Thank you, Jason. And Zachary, please.
Under further examination, and of my position also on the committee, I have concluded that I probably agree with Schneider on his comments, because if you think about it, the youth are the only people that, if they're employed, because they can get employed at 15, 16, 17, 18, and I think they're even debating whether youth should be able to vote at 16 now too. And it's probably for good reason, because I mean, if you think about it, they're paying taxes. Like if they're working, they're paying Social Security, they're paying, like, if their income's above a certain amount, they're paying taxes. Yet to cancel a vote on them just doesn't seem ethical.
Thank you, Zachary. I don't see any other hands. Jeanette, please, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. I apologize for being a little late. So I'm not sure where we are in the process. If you're just taking comments right now, or if you're close to voting again, we have the budget going on at the same time, so I apologize.
No worries. We are taking comments and about to go to the vote, but please feel free to share your comments.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you all for participating, and certainly understand some of the viewpoints. As now a sitting city councilor, I think the youth have a very strong vote and have a very strong voice as a youth councilor. I don't think that needs to be codified in the charter to have that voice. They're also not accountable to any elected, either whether it be their fellow youth or even citizens or community members of Tigard. And I do think it's a little odd that we as older people who are drafting a charter would help shape what the youth are supposed to be saying instead of the youth shaping it themselves. And so I would say, to me, it works fine. The system's not broke. They are heard. They're well heard, which is rightly appreciated. And so I would not support that this would be in the charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. So based on the comments that we've heard so far, the question that I would like to call is, does the committee recommend creating a chartered youth counselor position and then it be written into the charter with maximum council discretion? A yes vote would say that the youth counselor position would be added to the charter. A no vote would not add the position to the charter. This does not dissolve the youth counselor position as a discretionary position of council. Youth counselor Nog is not going to be dismissed from council in any way, and it does not end the recruitment process for our next youth counselor as well. Does anyone have any last comments before going to a vote?
Kim, just perhaps one quick comment. There's one candidate currently for the youth counselor position, and hopefully that person doesn't decide not to run.
Fair. Thank you, Jeanette. Nathan, please.
Just to be certain I know what I'm voting on, is there a meaningful distinction between a youth counselor position and a youth counselor program, for lack of a better word?
John is nodding. Shelby might be shrugging. Go ahead, Shelby.
Yeah, so I think the distinction in my mind is that a youth counselor is in my mind, is a clearly defined position, similar or identical to what we have now. A youth council program, in my mind, allows more flexibility, to the point Kim was making earlier, that there are a lot of different ways to engage youth in the council besides just having a singular position on the city council for an advisory vote. A youth counselor program to me is a little broader and allows for more council interpretation as to how to structure that involvement. So I think to me at least, there is a slight difference.
Thanks, Shelby. Knowing that, Nathan, did you have a proposal or were you comfortable with the position language?
Well, I'll say I would probably propose it differently, but I don't have a specific proposal at the moment.
Thank you. Zachary, please.
Might I just add again before we vote? Some kids, they pay taxes, like they pay dues, like they have their own, like they're not really represented if they're not part of this. And if we don't vote yes on this, then we're going to give the council an opportunity, if they just really don't like kids one year, to just kick out the whole program that we've fought for.
Thank you, Zachary. And Tony, please.
Well, I understand from Zachary that there's might not be a lot of visibility into Tigard's programs for youth, but it doesn't sound like there is a large outpouring from the youth making, a lot of demands that they want this position, and they want this involvement. So I guess that's just kind of one of my questions, is that if we're going to put it in the charter and force every future council to implement this program and maybe actively make sure that there's a representative somewhere from the youth, if the youth isn't currently moving in that direction, I'm a little bit curious if we're making decisions based on what we think the youth need to be doing, as opposed to what the youth are actually wanting to do.
Definitely consideration. Thank you, Tony. Shelby?
Yeah, so Tony raises a good point, and I think it made me think of our last discussion on the council ground rules, where we said council will have ground rules, but we didn't dictate what was in them. So to Tony's point, Nathan's point, and Jeanette's point, we could also consider something in the charter about how the Tigard City Council will, I don't know what the language would be, involve youth in its decision-making, pursuant to council rules or something like that. If the group wanted to have a little more flexibility in that, just throwing that out as an option.
Yep. If anyone would like to reword that to be that option, feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you next. And Margaret, please.
Yes, just as a reminder, because of some of the discussion, there is a youth advisory council that is appointed by the council, and there are sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 kids on there and they go through and they meet month to month or whatever and discuss different items. So there is a youth committee in the city of Tigard, and has been for quite a long time.
Yes. Thank you, Margaret. And Jeanette, please.
See if I could do my best to make a motion that we consider the council include youth council role and opinions within their goals and goal setting. Probably could we wordsmith a little more clearly. But if you want, I could take another stab at that.
Let me try typing for a second and I'll pull something up. Well, Derek, please.
Do we run the issue that Shelby discussed earlier, or do we run the risk where if we specifically call out one subset of the population, but not all of the others that we would hope would also be part of that list, that we end up running into the issue where we are exclusionary towards others and only inclusionary towards youth? You get what I'm saying? If we don't have an exhaustive list of who it is that we're trying to include as in our objectives, do we run an issue? I would ask Shelby that, just because we literally talked about it at the beginning of this.
Yeah, I mean, from a legal perspective, it's fine. But from the, council always has the ability to add. And so if they wanted a particular focus group on any other protected class, they could always have some kind of advisory group to do that. And so it doesn't exclude, but it doesn't give the protected position that just identifying youth would, if that helps answer your question.
So it would make everyone feel good, but it wouldn't actually, they wouldn't be beholden to it, is what I'm picking up here. Is that correct? So
council would be beholden to what's in the charter, but they could also go broader. So if they wanted a youth plus a women, plus a Muslim, plus a, they could do all that. But they would have to have, so it doesn't exclude others, but it clearly identifies the one listed.
Okay, so in any special endeavor, it would always have to include the youth and whoever else.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
Thank you. So before we move on, Jeanette tried wordsmithing. Does some combination between you and Shelby, does the committee recommend including youth engagement in council decision-making as a requirement of council? Does that start to get to your point?
It does.
Thank you. And Margaret, please.
And actually, I was going to speak against that. And I think the reason is what you've got listed as to what we would vote on is whether we have a youth counselor in the, just in the charter. To get specific and doing these other things, I feel very uncomfortable doing that. That would be something that the city council could do, because basically what it is just, it's to have a youth voice that, since they can't run for office and vote yet until they're 18. And so I'd feel more comfortable just with the language, Kim, that you proposed, that just has a youth counselor in there. To put parameters on it, I feel very uncomfortable.
Please use the raise hand, and we can call whatever question that this group ends up wanting to call. And Jason, please.
You started, I thought, to kind of answer it when you put that up on the screen, but I was not even clear whether, was that going to be the question? And then the two possible votes were yes, no, as they're written, or were those going to be rewritten?
Those were going to be rewritten. That's why I highlight things in yellow that I haven't gotten to rewriting yet.
I think it'd be a mistake to not take a vote on the initial, like we just spent 40, 50 minutes in discussion, and I think most people had gotten to a position, and I feel like I think it's okay that we consider different input, but I think it'd be a mistake to not vote on the original question that was on the table, because I don't know for sure, but I think it's possibly going to pass. And I think it'd be a mistake to at least not ask that question.
Would you like to make a movement to bring this to the vote?
Yeah, I move that we vote on the original question and answers that you put forward a few minutes ago.
Yep, this is the original on the screen. So just to be very clear, the question is, does the committee recommend creating a chartered youth counselor position, and that it be written into the charter with maximum council discretion? A yes vote would add the youth counselor position to the charter. A no vote would not add it to the charter. Are there any questions or concerns about the question that is currently being called? Okay, I'll start the vote. Carol Krager.
Yes.
Derek Lawson.
Not to the charter, no.
Jason Snyder.
Yes.
Jeanette Shaw.
No.
John Cook.
Yes.
Aaron Emerson.
No.
Lindsay Murphy.
Yes.
Margaret Doherty.
Yes.
Nathan Jackson.
Yes.
Tony Simpson.
No.
Zachary Claremont.
Yes.
The vote of 7-4, this group has failed to reach consensus on this question. So consensus is 75%. So with all 11 voting members here tonight, we needed 8 in order to achieve consensus, and we had 7. So generally by default, that means that we would not add the youth counselor position to the charter, unless anyone would like to reopen a different question to the group.
I don't think that we should leave it as is, so we probably need to work on it more. I think it's ironic that the default is also the no vote, and that almost by a 2-to-1 margin, it's just interesting. I'll make that observation.
I would say that that's the wording of my question. I could have worded it so that the default was the yes vote. So that one's.
No, I'm just saying the default, the no vote, the not taking action results in the current practice, regardless of which way it was. I just think that's kind of ironic. Not sure. Well, democracy is messy. What can I say?
And making a change to the charter is a big decision, is where we kind of fell with that the default would be reverting back to what's currently in the charter. Zachary, please.
Oh, it was the guy out my window taking out his trash, but and I was just thinking about what we were talking about though too, and I think that I mean it's almost like it's in more disorder keeping it the way it is now because there's no parameters in place. If we just keep it this way, if we don't vote yes vote, then that doesn't solidify it. But then if we also vote no vote, that doesn't give it away. So like to add to their concerns about having more than one person even like go in as like the youth representative, like right now, like if we just keep it how it is, we could incorporate as much youth representatives if we wanted to within council, or as least as we wanted to if they voted on it. So it just honestly gives council a lot of leeway, not even enacting or not enacting it. So I just don't understand, kind of like what Jason Schneider was saying, you know, it makes it a little bit more messy. And the counselors just kind of like, I don't know, you just better hope nothing bad happens where they mess up the program.
Shelby, please.
Yeah, well, so I do want to clarify that this conversation, Zachary, is just related to the charter. So there is a resolution in place that adopted the program that happened several years ago. The program has been in place for several years. So we're not talking about changing the program. We're just talking about should it be added to the charter.
Zachary, please.
I'm just saying potentially like in the future, like if we elect some counselors and they're really against the program, and they could just disband the whole thing. Or even if that doesn't happen and we just keep it as it is, and there are some people that are really for the program, they could push it too far and then add too many counselors, and then it'll make it look bad and then they'll disband the whole thing. So I'm saying that by not voting yes, it only serves to hurt the youth because, you know, we're not giving it a chance to really like shine itself, I guess, in true light.
Thank you, Zachary. Dolly, please.
Okay, I am not a voting member of the thing, but just to make myself feel better, I just want to understand, like, for example, we're doing this charter review 60 years after it was created in the first place. I want to be rest assured that it's not going to take another 60 years for us to change. And you know, this is something that we could change down the line, or the council down the line could change as the need arises. So I'm very disappointed that we didn't pass as worded right now, because like I said, I feel very strongly that putting a seat at the table for the youth is very important. We may have to think better on how to put that better in words, but not having that seat just moving forward is not a progressive optic as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Dolly. And we did have other language that had been discussed. I'm going to share that again. So this would be broader, less prescriptive in the charter, which does say, does the committee recommend including youth engagement in council decision-making as a requirement of council? So this could be added as a requirement of council to include youth decision-making somewhere in their process, but doesn't specify that that would be a youth council position, a youth counselor position. Zena, please.
I'm a non-voting member, so I felt the first one, what you shared, like giving a position, youth council position, that was little more concrete, and still it gives the flexibility, whereas this one is too broad. This one require youth engagement in council decision, but it is too broad.
Do you have a suggestion for a different question that you like to call?
I like the first one, first the way you put it.
Unfortunately, because that one failed, we can't recall that question without a change because that did fail the consensus vote.
I would like something like having the position, like a council position or something like that in this one. Like I don't know how to exactly frame it.
Thank you. Feel free to raise your hand and suggest another question. Appreciate you, Zena. Thank you. And Jason, please.
I mean, we could ask, the same question could be asked again if someone else indicated that they had more thoughts and had made a different conclusion, correct, Kim, just as a matter of process?
Correct. If someone wanted to change their vote, they're welcome to do so.
I just want to clarify that as matter of process here as we try to get somewhere. I'm just not, I guess my comments and really more questions are, I don't really know what this really means. Like the charter is supposed to be kind of meaty and set up the framework for the way the city and the council are going to function. This just seems like it's a random concept that would end up in the charter that is not like most of the other content of the charter. And so I just don't, I mean, if the purpose of it is to sort of try to make a platitude for the fact that we're not going to put the position in the charter, I think these are just words that I'm not sure they mean much unless maybe there's someone that can explain a lot more about what this would mean. And maybe that's what we should be voting on, not just these sort of basic words, I guess.
Thank you, Jason. And if you have another question that you'd like to call, please let us know. And Nathan, please.
So kind of 2 points. My first, just regarding the language on screen right now, I guess I had kind of a similar response where, I mean, it sounds good. I'm just not sure if it makes much different on the ground when it's put into effect. For my second point, I'm struggling to put it into words, but I was wondering about, rather than a youth counselor as a position, if when in the charter was every, I don't know if it's every year or what the frequency is, but every year the council has to go on record and choose whether or not to have a youth counselor that year. So they can choose not to have one, but they always have to go on record and say, we are explicitly choosing not to do that. Or yes, we are choosing to do that.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate the suggestion. And Jeanette, please.
Yeah, thank you. Part of the role here for all of us with the charters to make it more clear, not less. And this seems to, with requiring youth engagement and council decision-making, I could just see that future councils saying, what were they thinking? They could have been more clear what they mean by decision-making. And so I would not want to tie the hands of future councils and have them look back upon us and think, well, why didn't they be more clear? So I would not support something in this wording.
Thank you, Jeanette. And Zachary, please. Zachary, you're muted.
My bad. I was just about to realize that I forgot to unmute, but it's so wonky. But is what he was saying earlier. I believe that there should be like a thing where we can see like our counselors and see them vote at the beginning of the year on whether they should have a youth counselor position or not that year. That way we can see like, oh, like actually in writing, like how inclusive are certain counselors on like this issue, so that Tigard community knows what they're voting on too, as well as just other issues.
Thanks, Zachary. And Derek, please.
I mean, I share Jason's concern when he said that it's kind of strange that that wouldn't have passed with the number of people who were in favor of it. Like it's that point is not lost upon me. Just to explain the reason why it is that I did vote the way that I did and why I feel like we should leave it the way that it is just it's in the interest of what I think we've been doing throughout this entire process, is giving the council more latitude to implement things as they see fit, not codifying it in such a fashion where we actually tie the hands of the city in implementing something that may be, I don't know whether popular is the right way to put it, but just maybe difficult to implement at a future date. There are other personal opinions that I have on it, which just go to that there's a particular age of majority within the country, whether or not minors can enter into contracts under the law, whether or not they're responsible for their own actions. And I feel like there's already some deference paid to that with the fact that the position doesn't have a vote that is more than an advisory vote. So I get that. But one of the other members, I forget who, had talked about how failing to include this in some form is not progressive. And I fully agree. I'm not intending to be progressive in that fashion. Like that, I accept that at face value. I think that that is a fair statement and one that I'm willing to stand by. And I don't think that that we necessarily need to include it in this fashion. But currently, I'm not saying that my mind couldn't be changed, but I feel like we landed on the right side here, to be honest.
Thank you, Derek. And Tony, please.
I think I kind of am on that same vibe that currently we have a council and we have a structure, and I don't think that that's necessarily going to significantly change over the course of time, that people are going to be interested in hearing the voices of youth and having them involved, but putting it in the charter that it has to be a specific counselor position and they can't be involved in a different, maybe even more effective way to advise the councils and be involved. Even there may be some changes in technology that there can be a larger access to youth representation and votes in the future, and the council would be tied into having a counselor position that may or may not fit in the future role. I'm definitely not opposed to what the position is or the intent of what Jason and the other side is on this vote, what they're trying to achieve. I just don't think that this is the correct course of action to get that involvement, because right now we have Zachary, we have youth councils, we have a definite hearing the people's positions that are on the council and that are actively involved in the community in this process. There's a lot of passion in that, and I think that isn't that effort to keep youth voices and unheard voices involved is not likely to shift. I don't think that's not a concern that I share with them. I don't think that the youth are not going to be heard because this isn't codified as a position in the charter.
Thank you, Tony. And Zachary, please.
May I bring up, because I'm sure you said this at the beginning, Kim Izzo, right, about how there wasn't very many other constitutions that had a thing in it saying that they need a youth council representative, right?
There are no charters in cities with populations greater than 20,000 in Oregon that have a youth counselor position in their charter. That is what I can definitively say.
Okay, I think that should change. I mean, yes, I do agree with what he said about how we have really good programs and all that, but considering that it's such a big shift, and if we don't take that now, then who will say it'll stay the same in like 10 or 5 years? Like if someone just comes along, they don't like it enough, they could get rid of all the progress we've done. And so that's kind of my argument. It's not that why shouldn't we have these parameters in place, but more of like, why wouldn't we? Because if we didn't have them in place, then we're not guaranteeing that our city could potentially make the news someday as being more innovative and cooperative towards the youth that are also paying taxes. They're citizens too. And it's not like if they don't get elected by council, like appointed, it's not like it's a bad thing. It's just like, if there is a candidate that's obviously like well enough to be suited to be involved in the community, like they should be involved in the community, like it's just bringing that sort of idea that, oh, I'm a kid, I'm 16, I can work towards something so that maybe when I'm 18 or 20, I can run for city councilor one day, like, inspiring people with dreams.
Yep. Thank you, Zachary. So I'm gonna go John, Jeanette, Jason. We got our 3 J's in a row, and then we're going to pause the comment period and make some decisions. John, please.
Yeah, that was my comment, was basically, let's move on. I think we beat this one to death. It doesn't mean at the very end, when we have possibilities of making changes and editing, that something like this couldn't come back up again, or if somebody else changed something, but I don't think we need to talk any more about it today.
I agree. So like I said, Jeanette, then Jason, and then, sorry, Doug, we are going to close the comment. Jeanette, please.
Yeah, sorry, there's a little vacuuming, but I was going to say, Zachary, I wholeheartedly believe that you all will rise to the challenge and make sure that the council will always have a youth council position. And so I would hate that would never change. That's it, Jen.
Thanks, Jeanette. Jason, please.
Yeah, very quickly. I think we've had a very thoughtful dialogue and discussion. I agree with John that we're kind of at the end of where we can be for this conversation. I do want to leave everybody with a few thoughts, because we're sort of talking about this like it needs the flex and deserves the flexibility that many of the other things that we're leaving flexible in the charter are. And I guess I would challenge that thought a little bit. To put this conversation on its head, let's say that instead of talking about this, we were talking about whether or not people that are over 80 should be allowed to vote, or whether that should be in the charter or not, or whether they should be able to participate and run for city council, because who knows, their decision-making is impaired, whatever the reason is. Would we really be having the same conversation? I also want to remind everyone that we're literally talking about one advisory vote when we have 5 adults that are, or now soon to be 7 adults that are clearly outlined in the charter. The comment was made about technology changes, etc. I do not believe that there will be any kind of change that would come about in our community, world, or situation where it would be acceptable to say, I now don't care what 20% of the community thinks about something enough that I want to no longer have them have a voice at the table. I think that's unconscionable. I don't think there is such a thing. I think that is I understand the comment. I just don't think it is it's consistent with reality and how I think about the importance of this and the representation that I think our youth deserve to be ensured that they will have representation to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So just to be very clear, we have had 3 questions that have been called tonight, or 3 kind of questions that have been proposed. And so I'm going to go through those 3 right now. This is no longer the period for kind of giving your arguments, either pro or con. This is simply for talking about the question that's been called and whether or not you would like to make a motion to bring it to a vote, or in the case of the first question, if you would like to change your vote. So this was the original question that was voted upon. Does the committee recommend creating a charter youth counselor position and having it written into the charter with maximum council discretion? Is anyone who voted, so we had all 11 of our voting members, wish to change their vote? Great. Seeing none, we'll go to the second question that was proposed. I know this one, folks thought this was very broad and platitude, I think was the word that was used. And so does anyone wish to call this question? Does the committee recommend including youth engagement in council decision-making as a requirement of council? Hearing a lot of no's, seeing a lot of head shake. There is a motion to bring this to a vote. Is there a motion to bring this to a vote? And then the third question that I at least heard from 2 members, they may have expressed interest. although it didn't seem to really gain traction with the group, is does the committee recommend requiring council to choose each year to have a youth counselor? And would anyone like to call this question to a vote? And Zachary, please.
I adjourn.
You make a motion?
Yeah, I would want to vote on this. I like the argument to be able to see how responsive at least
Sorry,
maybe our counselors are.
I just heard you say I adjourn, which is different than making a motion.
Oh, okay, I make a motion. Oh, no.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone second?
Second.
Derek seconds. All right, so we're going to go to a vote. This is the question. Does the committee recommend requiring council to choose each year to have a youth counselor? A vote of yes would require council to have a process each year to establish a youth counselor position. A no vote would not require council to choose each year to establish a youth counselor position. Is that clear? And Karen, please.
I just want to clarify. This would be something that would go in our recommendations for ordinances. We have like a running list of things that we recommend the council do.
Not at this time.
Or is this language for the charter?
This will be language for the charter.
Okay.
And Shelby.
So I am just a little concerned with this language because the youth counselor position doesn't exist in charter. So it's weird to require council to vote on something that is not in the charter. So I just want to set that out there that I do have some concerns with this language.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you, Shelby. All
So
right.
given that, do we still want to then take the vote? Because our lead attorney says that there's concerns.
That's a good point. I will recall, is there a motion to still bring this to the vote? Jason, is there a second?
Well, I'll second it, but can we ask the city attorney how we could best get at this without being a problem? That seems like the right question to ask her.
Well, the fundamental issue is that you're asking them to take a position on something that they don't have to take a position on by charter. So that's my concern, is we would essentially be saying that the youth counselor position, the resolution has to continue and council has to choose otherwise. So that's my concern.
Wouldn't the question be the council is required to decide whether or not it's going to have a youth city councilor for the year and then take action based on that? I mean, isn't that really what we're talking about?
I think we could define youth counselor in the charter, couldn't we, Shelby? Same way we would have if we had created the position as the charter?
Yeah, because you're basically requiring that resolution to come before council every year.
Yes, that would be the requirement. Actually, so is there a motion to bring this forward, understanding that there are concerns with how this would be presented in the charter, and that we would work through those the best that we can? Tony, please.
I think maybe to help clear up that issue where we're asking what we're going to be requiring the council to choose to have or not have a youth counselor, and it hasn't been defined what a youth counselor is. Maybe in that little gray area and the blue area, we could say, and include a line item in the charter to define what a youth counselor is. So that way we could actually implement this if it was voted in favor.
If it was voted through, Shelby and I would work together to figure out how exactly to clean it up the best we can for future generations.
Yes.
Yeah. However, that is advised. Is there a motion?
I move that we vote on it with Tony's amendment.
Okay. And is there a second?
Second to Tony's amendment.
Could you please say what Tony's amendment was again?
Yes, absolutely. So does the committee recommend requiring council to choose each year to have a youth counselor and define youth counselor in the charter? So a yes vote requires council to choose each year to establish a youth counselor position and would define youth counselor in the charter. A no vote does not require either of those things. It does not require council to choose each year to establish a youth counselor position, nor does it define youth counselor in the charter. Is that question clear? Okay. Let's
And
go.
just to make it more clear, I think what we're really saying in the yes, just to be super clear, is the council's got to choose each year either to have one or not. Correct? That's the yes vote?
Yes, a yes vote is choose each year on whether or not to have a youth counselor. The no vote leaves the charter as it currently is, where a youth counselor position is not spoken of. And Jeanette, please.
Yeah, I'm confused. I don't know why we're doing this because it is the right currently right now to have that. And so I'm confused as to why we'd want to take this vote. And would this be the only place in the charter we'd be going back out to ask? I mean, it just seems to me we haven't established what youth counselor means. They still are elected position. I mean, it just seems to me a very odd vote to take when the council would likely make that decision each year anyway.
It does codify the current decision that council makes each year. That is true. And Zachary, please.
Yeah, to
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
okay, yeah. To Kim for what she said so beautifully. Yeah, it just kind of codifies it or amends it so that they have to make the decision that way. They don't just ignore it.
And it forces a public vote of the question as well. Okay, so this is the question. Any other questions about the question?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so they're not required to vote on it now every year.
No, they're not.
So, okay, I thought you said that they were.
No, just that
every year.
It's up to council discretion to have the position, but they don't explicitly, as far as I know, vote or not vote on it.
Carol, they could rescind the ordinance at any time, I think is what the enabling ordinance, right? That's what you're getting at, Kim.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is the question. You can see it on the screen. If we get to your name and you still have any concerns about the clarity, please let us know. But Carol Krager. Oh, you're muted, Carol.
Still a little concerned about it, but I'm going to vote yes so that they can vote on it.
Thanks, Carol. And Derek, please. Derek Lawson.
No.
Jason Snyder.
Yes.
Jeanette Shaw.
Yeah, I'm still unclear as to and define youth counselor in the charter. So does that mean each year the council would have to define?
No, so Shelby had brought up the point that if we're asking council whether or not to make a decision on youth counselor each year, and youth counselor isn't referenced anywhere else in the charter, that we should define what a youth counselor is in the charter. So we would ask council to make that decision every year and also have the definition of youth counselor.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it's needed. I'm going to go ahead and vote no.
Thank you. And John Cook.
No.
Karen Emerson.
No.
Lindsay Murphy.
Yes.
Margaret Doherty.
No.
Nathan Jackson.
Yes.
Tony Simpson.
No.
And Zachary Claremont.
Yes.
With a final vote of 5 yeses to 6 nos, this has also failed to pass consensus. So we are going to end our conversation on youth counselor this evening. When we go to our next meeting, we are going to move along into term limits. To John's point earlier, when we go back and do finishing touches and continue to review the charter, if this does come up, if folks haven't had a change of heart, if there is a different question that percolates, let us know. But otherwise, we are going to end that conversation here tonight. But that's not all, because we still have 7 more minutes and having a couple other concerns. But Margaret, please first.
Okay, and I would just like to say, I don't think that this vote means that we do not want the youth vote or the youth input and this kind of thing. It's the verbiage of how we get there to get them into the process. So it's not that I mean, the youth that are there are wonderful. So that's my view. This is not a vote against the youth. It's just against what the language was.
Yes, thank you, Margaret. And like I said, this does not change anything about the current youth counselor program at all. Does not rescind it, does not amend it. Okay, Dolly is our last comment, and then we really do need to move on from this topic.
No, it's okay. It's all right. I'll get over it.
Are you sure? Oh, okay. So as you may have noticed this evening, sorry, Zachary, we are going to move on from youth counselor. As you may have noticed this evening, we didn't complete our entire agenda. And while we've been having really great conversations in this group the entire time, and I wouldn't change any of that and all the thoughtfulness and discussion everybody brings, that does mean that we aren't quite getting through our scheduled topics as quickly as we thought we would. So looking ahead over the next couple months, we had planned to go through the end of June. Looking at our schedule, we're going to need about 2 more meetings, I think, to really flesh out the remainder of the charter concerns. I expect term limits is going to take about as long as our conversation tonight on youth counselor did, and perhaps even longer. And then we do have a few other meaty issues left on our docket. So I did not put in dates for these proposed meetings 13 and 14. I know folks have summer schedules coming up, kids are getting out of school. So we have a couple proposals. One is that we can kind of sandwich in more meetings. So instead of this every other week cadence that we've generally been on, although this in March and April, they got a little off because of other city events that were going on, but we could kind of sandwich them into the May and June timeline, or we could possibly extend further into the summer, into July. And I don't want to ask anyone to publicly kind of make that recommendation to this group this evening on this forum, but I will send out an email as always on Thursday and ask for your input on kind of how we could schedule this, especially if you have any really hard conflicts that would prevent you from being able to either sandwich meetings in the weeks that were not currently scheduled in May and June, or hard conflicts with travel and such in July. So any questions about the schedule and the ask that you're going to be getting from me on Thursday? Lindsay, please.
I guess just does that put us behind in terms of like when we need to get this to council, because they have to review it just in terms of, you know, if it gets voted on in the fall versus next spring, if that's something we kind of should think about in terms of cramming it in versus going to July.
That's a great question. I think John had brought this up before, but we are currently planning to do a May election. So we do have time. Trying to do all of the public outreach that we really wanted to do around this issue just wasn't going to be possible between now and November is kind of our current line of thinking. And I think John had brought this up at least 2 months ago as well. So he was further into the crystal ball, I think. John, please.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for pushing out a week so we could all attend the State of the City, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zachary, please.
I just wanted to say, I know on some issues I speak very strongly, and it's nothing against you guys. I just, I don't know, sometimes I get a little bit emotional with some of these issues because I, worry about some sort of altercations that might come, because of certain votes. But I wanted to appreciate everyone here for having this debate today or discussion. because it wasn't easy, and I know it was a lot of out of the box thinking, and especially for attending these meetings, because considering, we're having so many and we're really involved, and I really applaud everyone here who volunteers their time for this, because it's really a beautiful thing.
Thank you, Zachary. And yes, thank you all very much for your service and for all the time you're putting into this every other Monday night. And with that, it is 7:28. I hope everybody has a great evening.
Kim?
Yes.
Okay, I was locked out of Zoom briefly, and so I missed. What did you decide to do the elected officials at our next meeting?
We're doing term limits at our next meeting.
Okay, on the 22nd?
On the 22nd, yep.
Okay.
And then if time allows, council president.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
That will all be in the meeting guide and in the agenda as well on Thursday.
I know, just something happened. I had to log back in.
All right. Well, everyone have a great evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.